From the trenches of motorsports and Gearhead Central, this is RealTuners Radio, your all-motor, boosted, and nitrous-fed hour of power. Now, here's your hosts, the Reverends of RPM, the Faction of Traction, John Bewley, Scott Clark, Bill Fowler, Scott Evans, Mark Dahlquist, Mike Perduto, James Short, Tom Sewell, Brian Barnhill. This is RealTuners Radio.
Good evening and welcome to RealTuners Radio, episode 109. It's Wednesday, January 8th, 2020. A whole new year, and guess what? We are still here. Tonight's guest is Kory Willis from PPEI. He's a diesel guru, but also an outspoken voice for the fight to keep modern motorsports alive. Be sure to listen even if you're not into diesels, because besides some badass race cars and trucks, Kory has a lot to say about the EPA and the squeeze they're putting on our industry. So buckle up, tighten the straps, and fire up the bullet. It's time for RealTuners Radio. Boom. All right, there we go. I am so sorry, everybody. That was a horrible start for the year. I apologize. Man, that was all on me, too, and my bad audio engineering. Of course, Evans isn't here to hold my hand, so I'm going to bring these guys.
Your mouse around the upper right-hand corner. There should be a spot that says gallery view. Click on that and you'll see everybody.
Hey, you're live, guys.
Oh, okay.
And it'll highlight whoever's talking or whoever's the loudest voice.
Hey, so on the YouTube channel, I can see us on there live. Well, with a delay of
10 seconds or so.
Yeah, heck of a delay.
Yeah, and then I see Scott talking, but
trying.
Yeah, trying.
I'm talking. You can hear me, can't you? Do you guys hear me?
And it's a Woodford Reserve and Coke.
Check.
Apparently we're going live with the video thing. I better get a webcam, huh?
Well, is there not a camera built into your laptop?
No.
Yeah, you better get something. You should just buy the little $60 cam that I was talking about. That
you guys can hear me now.
The other day.
Yeah,
we can hear you now.
Yeah, so you're live. We're live.
and
everybody at least got the intro in the video, though. I hope you got to see that. I worked hard on that damn thing.
Yeah.
Apologize for
it sounded
such
good.
A slow start. Holy
Good.
crap.
We're sorry for the slow start, everybody. Our guest got bored and left.
Yeah.
No. I had to have a little drink.
I see him. We can see him here. Let's see. Priority view, speaker view.
We got a 7-second latency to the video, by the way, from where we are to what our folks are seeing. So Scott, when you stop talking, your mouth moves, and then it's pretty good.
So this
that's normal.
Right
that's normal, Bill. That's how it's been for 3 years. But
it's always that way. YouTube is behind us live by a few seconds just because of the nature of streaming.
Gotcha.
Don't mind us, everybody. It's our first time doing this.
We just got a few changes we're trying, and obviously we had a few little simple hiccups tonight.
Yeah. So
time to drink.
Yeah, have a drink. I can be.
Cheers.
All these errors, I'm going to be hammered before you know it.
Hey, when you guys clicked on the RealTuners on the subscribe button, did yours pop up a hack by the FBI, or is that just me?
That would be just you, hopefully. We've had a lot of people signing up, so it's a good sign.
That was funny.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, mine just says enable recording and real-time translation, but never mind.
There we go. I see it now.
Okay.
I don't have any idea how to load a photo, so you're all going to get a blank screen from me.
Yeah, we got a blank screen from Mark D. Scott Evans figured out how to put his picture up.
So
Fowler, me, Kory, and Brian are brave.
I'll tell you guys later. I know where to do it.
Okay.
All right.
So anyway, welcome aboard, everybody. Let's listen in. I'm not even looking at Facebook. I'm just looking at YouTube right now. I can't do Facebook at the same time. So maybe Dahlquist watch Facebook and Mixler tonight.
Yeah, I've got Facebook up.
Sorry about that, but welcome aboard, Kory Willis. How are you doing, man?
Hey, man. Doing well. Glad you guys had me on.
Good. No, appreciate it. Where are you out of? You're in Texas somewhere.
No. The swamplands, man. Louisiana, Lake Charles area.
Even better.
West of Lafayette.
Oh, cool. Even better. Where they eat good food.
Yeah. Man, real good food. I mean,
give us a little background.
They can't beat that.
Give us a little bit of background on your diesel tuning and your diesel work first. Let's start with that. Just the history of what you've been doing. I mean, I know it's PPEI now. I think you've got a longer history than that. Give us the background. How'd you get started and how you got to where you're at now?
No, for sure. I started with the diesel programming around 2007, just a hobby. I had a little rental company and a couple other little things I was doing. And but playing with my diesel truck was just a blast. It was fun, and we were stacking programmers and all this stuff back then. You know, we didn't know what to do. And long story short, started adding ports to my truck, and it wouldn't run right. So ended up taking and getting someone to tune it, and then I kept having to go back for revisions and all that good stuff. And I finally just bought the software myself and played with it pretty heavily for about 2 years on tuning. Never charged anybody anything. I mean, I was tuning in trucks, like just friends and stuff, just playing around for free for like 2 years. And then we built a really high horsepower, like a 50, back in 2009, roughly, a really high horsepower Duramax. And we broke a world record with it. And I still wasn't doing like professional tuning. I didn't consider myself professional at all. But when I did that, people just started loading up my phone and wanting programs, and it's like, I don't have time for any of this stuff. So I just charged basically a huge rate for it, and thinking it would make people quit buying, and people kept purchasing tuning. So I was like, okay, I guess I gotta really make a business out of this thing. So we started basically sending out tuning, mostly all remote stuff. And then we went from that in 2011, whenever the 2012, and the LML Duramax came out, and it wasn't able to be tuned or anything like that. The ECU was locked down with the nasty RSA. And long story short, it became a pretty nice challenge. And so we kept attacking it, and then finally broke into the ECU, made some horsepower, and that's really whenever we got real recognized as a reputable company, was around 2012.
Nice. Not a bad start.
Since then, it just kind of just escalated up.
So what is the main business for PPEI these days?
What is the main business for PPEI?
Yeah.
Right. So we've pretty much focused everything we have on programming the trucks with all of the emissions components on them, and then being able to pass all the emissions testing and whatnot with that to satisfy what the EPA states is legal for street vehicles. So we've taken all of our efforts and pretty much put them there. And on top of that, taking and actually focusing on the hardware as well. So not just the calibrating for all the emissions components on with making nice horsepower, but also the flaws in the hardware, making them better, and hopefully some future options.
Cool.
So let me ask for the people that are listening, because we've got 50 states and some territories and things like that. And there are people that say, well, you know, they don't check in my state. So why would being emissions legal, why would that be important? I mean, they don't check. What difference does it make?
Yeah. So it's a good topic, because it's a really nice misunderstanding too. So let's take, for example, you know, it might not be something that's checked in your state, but it's still a federal regulated item. So it's kind of like you would take weed, you know, where it's not legal in Louisiana, but you go to Colorado and smoke it down, you know, well, you'll still get in trouble for it here, even though, you know, there's ways of accessing it there. So it's the same thing with these trucks. At any point in time as well, where it is legal in Colorado, so to speak, federal agency can come in and stop any of them as they wish as well. So it's a federal thing more than anything.
So you're saying that the federal government just picks and chooses which laws they wish to enforce?
Sure, the way it seems.
Yeah, Mark, I think we'll say that without putting Kory on the spot with that. But yeah.
All right, I'm sorry for the heavy sarcasm.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's one of those things that, it's really been difficult to understand the exact law and the way it's interpreted. So it's definitely a common topic of confusion, and the way they treat some people versus they treat others is, debatable on how enforcement works for sure.
I think worth noting too is in most states, even if they don't check, doesn't mean that it's legal there. Most states, the same stuff is illegal. They just don't bother to check it, so it's harder to enforce. But technically, it could be
because
any time.
Because it's federal law, it's not
right.
State
exactly.
law.
Right.
And this is probably worth clarifying for everybody who's listening to this, is that while most states have put into place whatever their vehicle inspection, emissions regulations, et cetera, are, only the state of California and those states who have formally elected to follow it are allowed to set and manage separate statutes in excess of federal standards. But the bottom line is the federal standards govern 49 states, which is realistically these days 50 states. So the bottom line is, if you're modifying an emissions controlled vehicle and each state currently defines what an emissions controlled vehicle is, then you run the risk of this. And the risk for an individual owner is relatively minor in states where they're not reinforcing, they're not enforcing these laws. However, if you are a shop or a company that makes products that do this, think about Bully Dog, think about SCT, think about more recently on the diesel front. You've had companies that have paid hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in fines, and are being asked to not only correct the issue, but they're also being asked to, how do I put this politely, rat out their customer base. So be aware that as you do these things, this is something to consider. Who you deal with, where you buy your parts from, and how they're being installed, and what kind of tune do you have, because unfortunately this battle's not over.
You're correct. You're correct. And to touch base too on the rat out part, it's one of those things as well where if the government comes in and they say, hey, we're wanting to see what you've been doing, it's not so much a request. They'll come in and seize your servers to see what you've actually been doing. There's no secrets when you're dealing with the government, for sure. So, if anybody was thinking that they would have some type of pesky workaround or loophole, the government, they've done this a million times. They understand the loopholes. They know what to do. So they'll chase the rabbit hole down wherever they desire to go.
Yeah, and for those of you who hadn't heard about the Bully Dog SCT thing and the parent company there, part of their settlement was they also had to push out software updates. So, for example, we've used an SCT tuner on some of our modular Ford stuff at our shop, and when we updated the hardware settings and the firmware settings in the SCT tuner, most of the stuff we had on there, frankly, went away. Because they can only download things that have been officially approved. So be aware that, we tend to think about hard parts or camshafts or cylinder heads or whatever, but since we've been doing so much for so many years now in software and firmware, that could be changed, over the internet, and is being required as part of these settlements to change these things over the internet. So be aware that this could retroactively affect a part that you're holding in your hand right now that you use to tune your car. You update it and it could change. So check with the manufacturer, check to see what they're doing. They've all issued statements saying what they're doing to comply or not comply depending upon their situation. So be aware of all those things. Kory, you mentioned that you're doing work to improve the performance of these vehicles within the envelope of emissions legality. And that still has real positive effects for people, right?
Correct. Yeah, it really does, and ultimately, the race, there's kind of two arguments that happen there. There's one that is the street use calibration. There's one that's a race use calibration. Currently, as issued kind of by SEMA as well and recognized, is the race use side, manufacturers really have no definition as to what they can or cannot produce if it can work on an OEM application as well. So that's kind of one argument. That's a whole another one to the side. But, the one like now that we're really focusing on is the street stuff, where we know It's cut and dry. If this thing's going to be, if we produce anything at this point in time without having any certainty as to what's going on with racing, we have to get everything approved. So what we're doing is we basically do all of our own in-house testing. We're pretty well following FTP 75 testing, and then we go from there and we bring it up to SEMA Garage to take and get 50 state compliant. So that's where we're at now, is actually being able to handle the EO numbers.
So at that point, do you know that you're 50 state compliant, or, I mean, you still, I mean, I know from the process that doesn't necessarily make you the manufacturer on record. So, I mean, I guess, how do you get certified that something's compliant, that you know, you can say, hey, here's my certificate, or here's our paperwork on file, or how does that work for an aftermarket guy?
It's kind of weird. You know, I don't know exactly how it's supposed to be done. You know, if you look at the clean air and the way that the EPA defines it is a reasonable basis. So you've done reasonable basis testing. I think one big problem is that there is no definition as to what is considered reasonable basis, right? So rather you're doing FTP 75 testing, or if you're doing your due diligence to make your tuning legal for the highway, currently I'm not aware of any reasonable basis that you can do that would be acceptable by the EPA or be stamped and say, hey, we see that you've done your reasonable basis, your due diligence, you know, you're good to go. I haven't seen anything like that, but the only thing that I know that you can actually get your stamp and say, hey, you're good to sell and whatnot, is basically getting an EO number, going through, you know, Corp, or SEMA's got one of the best setups right now with their garages, which is what we're also utilizing.
Yeah,
so,
but their garages, do you just use them to validate? Do you use them to validate your compliance? You know, they do the O2 sniffer test. I mean, they can't provide you with a certificate or anything, right? They can just tell you, yeah, you're at least compliant.
Correct. Actually, what they do is, so they'll take and they'll do all of the testing that basically Corb would do, and then they take and they submit your application turnkey to Corb, and their SEMA Garage relationship with Corb is very, very, very good. So if SEMA Garage tells you, hey, this is going to pass, you're going to get an EO number, you can mark it down. You're going to get an EO number. So that is one advantage
EO
that
numbers
SEMA Garage has
for calibrations. Then you've received EO numbers for calibrations.
No, we've applied, and I think we're about 3 weeks away from actually going and doing all of our testing. I have worked with some aftermarket manufacturers though, and provided calibrations for them that they've gotten their parts tested with that calibration, and it passes. Yeah. So we're pretty familiar with the process, but for us, we're on the waiting list right now, basically, to be able to get all of our EO numbers, or at least
I'd like to go back to something that Kory said. Kory said that, you know, they're putting their efforts into the 775 testing, or what have you, because without the future known of how they're going to treat racing. Can you expound on that, Kory?
Yeah, so it's, you know, the thing is that I would like to think that you've got a pro mod, and they're not going to come in and tell you that, or tell a manufacturer that they can't manufacture this port for a pro mod. Okay, so let's say, for example, that are we still on? Everything's still there?
Yep, we're still on. Yep.
Okay, good deal. So I'd like to assume that, you know, okay, we're making a big kit of whatever you want for this pro mod. This is obviously only going to be able to be used in a racing application. Let's say that it's the OEM block and it's filled. It's a filled block. You can't really drive it that terribly far. It's going to overheat. So you would think, no problem, this is for sure for racing. But there is no guarantee that if they wanted to, that they couldn't take and charge you for that, considering that it was an OEM block, because there is no provision for racing is the biggest thing. I would like to think that, you know, that they would recognize it as racing, but considering there's nothing in black and white that states that this is legal for racing, that's kind of the gray area. And that's kind of what I have concern with.
Right now, isn't the law basically written the way where if the vehicle was originally an EO compliant vehicle for road use, any part on that vehicle, regardless of whether it's race use or not, is modifying the factory emissions and is no longer EO compliant?
Yeah, you're correct. So anything that on a vehicle that came with a certificate of certification. Basically, any street vehicle, the law right now is written that you cannot modify it. And just like the EPA stated recently at SEMA, they said, well, no, it's always been illegal to modify it, but it's at our discretion. So, you know, we won't go after those vehicles.
Yeah, to be clear, guys.
That's a nervy area, you know.
Yeah, so to be clear, when we use the term EO, an EO is an exemption order, and an exemption order is a creature of the CARB, California Resources Board. And that's a process which the EPA has approved of and allowed to go forward, which means if you have something that is a CARB-issued exemption order, an EO order, you saw people advertising that, and you've installed that and had it properly calibrated on an emissions control vehicle, then you can use that evidence certification tag to prevent you from running into further problems in any state that is recognizing the CARB standards, and the other states that frankly aren't testing for that, so it doesn't really matter. There was an interesting question that showed up on the YouTube channel from Killswitch, who says, I'm from Canada. Say I tow my race car in the U.S. with my Duramax that has a DPF, that's the particulates filter, delete tune on it. What is my risk level? Anybody care to comment, Kory?
Yeah, I can pretty clearly comment on that as we explore that. So that's another thing too. Let's touch on that for just a second. That's a good topic. So the Clean Air Act only pertains to America, right? So technically, an American could take and ship outside of the country, but then you know that the loophole is that they're going to go out of the country and manufacturer's going to ship it back in. There's problems there, or someone's going to take your product, drive across the lines, and then violate the Clean Air Act. Although it was on the person driving that vehicle, where they can do whatever they want in their country, or their country is not affected with the Clean Air Act. Once that comes on American soil, the EPA is holding you responsible for that person's doing. So now is the individual going to get stopped? Maybe so. The individual might get pulled over, he might get inspected, and he might get a ticket. And that's his doing. But if they really wanted to chase the rabbit hole down, they come back around and find out that an American citizen has provided the calibration to allow the vehicle to violate the Clean Air Act, and it did violate the Clean Air Act back on U.S. soil, then that goes back on the manufacturer. So that's the loop in short on that. Selling out of it's a big misconception that selling out of the country, if you're a U.S. citizen whatsoever, is a loophole around the Clean Air Act if that product ever was to make it back into the state. So that's one big thing that we're, not to chase a rabbit trail, one big thing that we're working on is we want to provide our code. We've got customers in the Middle East. We've got customers all over the world. And currently I'm really not able to provide them a solution because we don't have a method that I can protect not getting that back into the state. So we're actually working on a geofencing type calibration that would default back into factory parameters and things like that, just to even further satisfy our interpretation of the Clean Air Act.
We have a listener with a question for you, Kory. Nate Corwin was wondering, didn't Trump pass legislation to require the federal rules to be available for companies so there's no longer loopholes for the feds to alter the laws to their needs?
Yes, there was. And there was also a lot of talk about the pullbacks that they did with CARB and things of that nature. And I really don't have much to say on that, as I'm not fully... I'm aware of what he's talking about, but I don't have enough research on the topic to be able to really elaborate an educated opinion. My opinion would be kind of just theoretical.
The short answer on things like that, Mark, and for everybody in the audience, is that for better or worse, executive orders, and by the executive I mean as in the President of the United States, whether any president, executive orders can be challenged in the courts, and are obviously being challenged frequently with President Trump. So whether an executive order applies to an agency ruling following a duly constituted law like the Clean Air Act, it's all up in the air in terms of the court interpretations, individual state interpretations of stays or decisions to go forward with those. So the big one has obviously been the announcement by the Trump administration EPA to say that California's special status, which was part of the original originating statutes in the Clean Air Act, was going to be changed because it wasn't statutory, it was agency decided. That's up in the air. So all of these things are up in the air. And the answer is, anybody who's being honest, we don't know. So if you're trying to make a good decision, work with your shop, work with your tuner, talk about what it is you're doing and think intelligently about the state that you're in. SEMA has a really good resource on their website for the SEMA Action Network and for SEMA members itself, where you can look state by state and see what the emissions laws are, what's required, what has to be done. You can also look at your own, individual state. What is the DMV requiring? And the fact of the matter is, you need to know, because the enforcement levels are going up. The number of visits to shops and individual places of business are going up. California is the worst, but followed very closely by New York and Massachusetts and some other states. So, be careful, guys. Think about what you're doing. Think about how you're doing it, and think about the locale in which you're doing it to make these decisions on what you want to go. But in the meantime, working with something like PPEI is a good way to get better performance, get your vehicle running, make it work, and know that you're doing it at the best possible way within what the laws are being interpreted at the federal and the state level. So, make good decisions. Think about that stuff. Kory, any comments further on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is how confusing the laws are. I would, because we speak, and all of us here have kind of a little bit different interpretation. I know me and Scott had a really good conversation on Facebook for a little while about how we've seen the racing laws.
Hey, wait a second. Are you sure it was a really good conversation with Scott on Facebook?
I think so. So, because it opens up the interpretation of how we all view this matter. So I think any conversation is good conversation. So yeah, I really do. I think because we got the side there that provides really high end stuff to a certain customer base, and then you have another section kind of like us that supply to a different customer base. So if you talk to 10 different tuners, you get 10 different answers basically about how they interpret the legality of racing. And, and really, if you have black and white laws and not interpretations, we wouldn't have a bunch of different answers. We would all have the same answer. So I think it's universally agreed on that these laws are and interpretations of racing is quite confusing, for what you can and can't do. And I think the reason for it is because we don't actually have a legality to racing currently. There's nothing black and white. We just have what they say they will and won't go after.
So that kind of
under their discretion.
That kind of leads into what we would be calling the RPM Act, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Which in my opinion right now is about the only hope.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us about the RPM Act? What is it?
So the RPM Act is it's an act that basically is going. I could take and actually pull up the exact proposition for it, but it's a act that basically protects motorsports in a sense of racing. So it wants the EPA basically to identify what they consider to be a racing vehicle. That way, this discretion and understanding of it isn't so confusing. I need to pull up the exact definition of what it is, but for the most part, if you have a vehicle that is a legitimate racing vehicle, then you're okay. You're good. You trailer it, doesn't drive on the public road. You trailer it to the track. You trailer it back home, And then the manufacturers can actually develop parts for that racing vehicle. For example, we have tons of customers with 1,500 horsepower plus Duramaxes that have filled block. I mean, these trucks can't stay running for more than 10 minutes at a time before they basically overheat. So those vehicles are legitimate racing vehicles. You can't drive them on the highway if you wanted to. But right now we're being told that they're not legitimate racing vehicles because they were once vehicles with emissions controls on them. So if that be the case, then racing for the diesel industry does not exist legally. And we're unaware of how to make it legal. So I think if the RPM Act would help with that for us to be able to get that black and white. I don't know exactly what all would entail of making it to where it would be legal. Do I need to make this vehicle not registered? Do I need to maybe sign some type or show some type of proof that it's not a street worthy vehicle? I don't know exactly what all that would entail, but there needs to be some type of format that can be gone through to make it black and white of what is legal and what's not legal. And the RPM Act helps with that.
And for our people listening, Brian Barnhill did post a link to the explanation and wording of the RPM Act on the Facebook chat.
Yeah, let's see. While I'm here, I can pull it up too.
Yeah, it's just the short description, but it's pretty much in a nutshell what it is without reading the whole legal bill being introduced. And I believe, isn't that being introduced here shortly?
Yeah, what's the best way to support this bill? How do we get better recognition of this? How do we get more support for it? How do we go about that, Kory?
For sure, I think it's really important that everybody does it. The senators and congressmen are listening. We went to Washington and sat in with quite a few politicians, and believe it or not, a lot of them were not aware of the situation that's going on in the racing industry. Although you would think they would be, they've got a lot of big fish to fry, right? But if our skillet's burning pretty hot and people are sending in these referrals like they have on SEMA, so you go to SEMA, it's got a link to basically sign up, tell your senator what's going on, and to protect motorsports. And so if people go on there and they actually sign that, fill out, it takes 2 minutes. Fill it out, click send, it'll send it to everyone in your state that can represent you. So best bet, go to SEMA, click on RPM Act now, sign up, click send, you're done. 2 minutes, you did your part in to help protecting motorsports.
Yeah, that link I sent out actually has a link at the very top that basically you put in your address and it does everything for you. So open the link I sent, click on that, put in your information.
I'd like to add a little bit to that, if I may. So a couple of things. SEMA has done the very best they can to make it as easy as possible for people to send what amounts to, I want to be blunt here, a form letter. You can click on, you can say what state you're in and where your zip code is, and it will automatically, your congressperson, your senator, et cetera, and then you're sending that notification, and everyone who does that means that there's another message in the inbox. I'm going to suggest another route for people that are listening to this who really want to do something on this, which is look at the auto-generated email, copy those email addresses, and maybe write your own email to your senator, to your congressperson, and explain why it should be legal to convert. If I have just hypothetically an 87 Fox notch body that I want to turn into a race car, then I should be able to do that. And the EPA in its rulemaking had come out with a rule that they intended to interpret the Clean Air Act as that you could not convert an emissions controlled vehicle into a race car. And the RPM Act is specifically designed to address the idea of you cannot convert emissions controlled vehicles into race cars. So talking about the diesel trucks that Kory mentioned, there isn't a diesel truck produced in this country that was not produced under emissions regulations. So therefore, there could be no such thing as a racing diesel truck. So that's what the RPM Act was designed to get at. Does it protect everything in all forms of racing? No, but it's an important step in the process because we have all, since the dawn of time, been converting what were originally street cars, production cars, into race cars. You know, where they're talking Larry Larson's Nova, or we're talking about, you know, my Mustang Fox body, or, you know, and James Short's, you know, Camaro. All of us started out with what were a car sold as a new go down the road car. And in the state of California, well, that's 67 or newer, and different states are that. And therefore, it's either a race car or it's a street car, but it can't be both. And you run afoul of the law if you're somewhere in the middle. Now, I'm a drag week guy, so I have a drag week car. My 71 Mustang is kind of illegal for that. If I were to have an 87 Mustang with a 600 cubic inch big block with nitrous on it, that'd probably really not be legal if I had tags and everything on that car, hypothetically. So the bottom line is every state you got to deal with this stuff. And the RPM Act is a step in that direction. Does it solve all the problems? No. But it is the way to remind the lawmakers at the federal level that racing is part of this country's heritage from the first time there were cars. Henry Ford raced, for God's sake. So get out there, do that, but be willing to put your name to a personal email where you talk to someone, you say, I'm a voter, I vote, you need to pass this and get this out of committee. It has been in the committee, it has been up for a vote multiple times over the last 10 years and never got there. So it's a start. Does it solve everything?
Yeah,
no, but it solves a lot. It's a big step.
Yeah, that's a very good recommendation, Bill, for sure. Adding that personal step in the email is a huge thing, and that's doing that type of stuff is what scored me my meetings in Washington. So I think that's a great recommendation.
So Kory,
and I think I'll add one
ahead.
more, if it's okay. I'm gonna add one more thing to that too. Whenever you do make your personal email to them, be smart about the topic that you're talking about, right? You can't tell the lawmakers, hey, none of these vehicles should have emissions components on them. I mean, that's not a conversation that's going to go very, very far. You need to be talking about legitimate race conversions. So don't tell them how bad emissions suck or they don't suck or what your feelings are about them. That's a topic that will go nowhere and will make everyone look stupid. So the best topic is to talk about actually how to legally convert a street vehicle to a racing vehicle. That's what the topic should be about whenever you send the email personal to them.
Thanks,
Diesel
Kory.
Guys.
Speaking of racing vehicles and diesel engines, you've got kind of a pretty cool diesel race car. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, go ahead. All right, I'll shut up.
Pretty. Yeah, you know what? It might be one of the world's slowest pro mods, but it's getting somewhere. No, we've got a 408 cubic inch Duramax in it. It's a nitrous fed, happy little pro mod that's trying to grow some legs so it can maybe walk a little bit. It's crawling right now. We finished it up maybe 2 months before we actually went to the track with it in public, which is generally a terrible idea. But we went out there and we ran a 430 at I think 168 was our best. And so it's starting to get somewhere. We just got to take and get all the power to the ground. And then once we get the power to the ground, add some cubic inches to it maybe and get a little bit more potential to put air in the chamber and make power, go faster.
I put a picture.
But yeah,
just put a picture up.
Yeah, it's a C7. It's a C7 Corvette. Jerry Bickle built the chassis for it. It's got a Synergy body on it, and it's pretty different for what the diesel scene is used to. We put 2 Motecs on it. One's controlling a lot of the suspension and chassis. The other one's controlling the engine and transmission. And we've got everything monitored. So we fully control the vehicle. We 100% gas approach to it. So I mean, we put a target lambda that we're trying to hit. And the main thing is the core just be as efficient as possible, no smoke, and try to go out there and compete a little bit with some of the gas guys. So y'all been out there a lot longer than us, so you got to give us a little bit of a rope. We've got a ways to go, but we're going to work our way up and see if we can make some power and go compete a little bit.
So Kory, is this the quickest, fastest diesel-powered drag race car in the world?
It's the fastest Duramax, but with the Levant or friends over at Firepunk have a little S10 that they build. They make tons of power out of these big D&J motors, Cummins, and they ran a 426, and we ran a 430. So we're not the fastest just yet, in a door slammer, so to speak, but we'll hopefully get there before too terribly long. We ran it without having a whole lot of power and really relied on just the lightweight of the car, and we did well. But next time we go to the track, we're gonna try to lock the converter up and give it a little fuel and see if we can make it go a little faster. I think we got some threes in the car for sure.
So maybe you should make it a radial versus the world car. Not that helps necessarily.
Yeah, I know.
But guys,
we've kicked that discussion. I know, right? We've kicked the discussion back and forth a little bit. I think we'll see what we can do here. And in diesel motorsports, everybody thinks that we're well advanced and we've got it going on, but playing over on the gas side, we are so far behind. It's unbelievable. But in diesel world, it's something. In gas world, we got a long ways to go, and we're looking at trying to target some of the gas world with it. I think we're going to need some more cubic inches, but we'll run what we brung and have some fun with it.
That's impressive. I don't know what anybody else thinks, but I just love to see somebody like that breaking rules and doing something different.
Yep, that's cool. What's cool? We like that.
Yeah, we really took a professional approach on the car. The last time I had raced was probably around 2012, and I told everyone that I wouldn't get back into it unless I could do it on a level that I, would dream of doing. And with this car, we've got a lot more chassis than we have basically everything else. So everything's there for us to go fast. It's just a matter of us actually putting our brains to it and putting the power to the ground. So it's really, really, really cool, but we've got a long ways to go to hit our goals with it.
So are you guys also running, trucks or working with customers on trucks? Because obviously these days we see a lot of diesel trucks at the drags, all kinds of classes and all of that. Are you guys working with folks on that too?
Yeah, we do. We've done it for years and years, man. We done a ton of sled pulling trucks and tons and tons of drag racing trucks. It's just with the current laws, we're unable to provide a lot of these high-end calibrations for these trucks, as we have no legal means of being able to supply someone with a 1,500 horse calibration to match their parts. So that's kind of it's really bummer, but it kind of puts the brakes on us for now until racing's recognized. So yes, we've done tons of them, but as of right now, we have no legal means of being able to send out a tune to be able to support the parts of someone being competitive in a racing environment for diesels.
Gotcha. So without going into specifics, it sounds as if the feds and other state authorities are actually going out there and trying to, well, we could on the one hand say interfere with people's ability to do this kind of business, but so from a third party observer standpoint, that from your point of view, that is what's kind of going on in the space right now, is that at the federal level, they're making it difficult for tuners and companies, not yours specifically, obviously, but others, to actually support the racing that we have seen in the past with these kind of vehicles?
Yeah, and the common response you see online is people say, let them come try to take my race truck. Well, they don't have to come try to take your race truck. If they take us all away, that we can't provide you really cool turbocharging and big fuel pumps and huge injectors, well, you're not going to have a race truck. Racing stops. So if they stop the calibrating and hard parts world, then they're not going to have to go to the racetrack and say, give me your race truck. They stop it at a manufacturing level. So, you know, that's kind of the big picture to it. And likewise with all the new vehicles, you know, if you can't support a new vehicle with a calibration, anything with an OBD port is going to be considered a vehicle outside of regulation, or within regulation, basically. And we have no recognition for racing, then not just calibrating and tuners stop, but every hard port stops. So it's a pretty big deal. You know, we've got a lot of guys that, especially farmers up north, that sled pulling is a huge thing for them. It's happened for them for years and years and years. And guys that we've been supporting for, you know, 10 years on sled pulls, you know, looking for 6,000 RPMs out of these old tractor motors, we're unable to provide them calibrations right now. You know, and these are trucks with huge weights on the front of them, and they can't drive on the street, but we can't legally provide them any programming. And it's a super, super, super bummer for us, you know. But ultimately, those same guys that say, well, they're not going to take my truck from me. Well, they're not going to take their truck from you. They're going to take away people like us and you know, manufacturers, to where you can't get the parts for them. And it seems like it's unrealistic, like it can't happen. But I mean, if this doesn't get under control, it can and will happen.
So I got to say, I mean, personally, I've done lobbying in my life. Sorry. But the bottom line is we all do what we got to do and the work that we have to do. But you mentioned that you have actually gone and appeared, you've been up on the Hill, you've worked with Congress people and all do that. Can you let the audience here understand a little bit of how much of a sacrifice and a commitment it is to spend time when you could be working with customers, you could be developing parts, you could be selling parts, and instead you're hauling your ass up to Washington, D.C. Could you let people understand a little bit more about what that's really like?
It sucks, man. I'm telling you, you know, I'm from a small town in Louisiana. I have no business in Washington. And, you know, I've sat down with some of these the congressmen and senators, and I was this far from having a meeting with Trump whenever he came down to Lake Charles. It was just, everything was so close. But, you know, being able to be able to connect with these people and let them actually understand the livelihood and the reality of the pastime of racing in America, they don't understand how this stuff is being done. So whenever I presented it to a bunch of the congressmen, senators, and things like that, they're like, wow, we had no clue that y'all were, you know, dealing with this kind of stuff. So I think it's a big deal to them. But on top of that, I did an analysis of 2019, and 80% of my time in 2019 was actually spent basically doing politics or legal work regarding this topic. And it really, really, really put an impact on our typical R&D. I've got some really great engineers and calibrators and a really awesome team at our office that held it down. But, you know, when the leader of the pack's actually having to take and deal with things that they wouldn't typically deal with, it's a kicker. It's a big, huge sacrifice, you know. It sucks. I really wish I wasn't the candidate, but I felt like we were in a position that, you know, we financially were able to afford the flights, you know, afford going over there, afford the downtime. And I felt kind of responsible for standing up and expressing our opinion for the industry and the racing industry. I was depending on SEMA pretty hard on a lot of it, like most of us do. But, yeah, and I think they've done a good job. But at the same time, you know, the personal level, I was trying to really touch them on. And I think it had some impact. You know, we went there, and then 15 days later, it got reintroduced back into Congress, you know, on the 16th. And so we're doing our best, doing our part. But yeah, it's a huge sacrifice. I mean, we're pretty passionate about it. And I can't say that we've done everything 100% the right way or by the book. But if there was some type of book we could read, know how to properly do this stuff, then it would be a go. You know, I found that a lot of the lobbying efforts and political money spent kind of goes down the drain. You know, kind of learned that the hard way. You know, it's really hard to get your voice heard. Social media helps out quite a bit with it, but at the same time, social media can hurt the industry too. You know, people think that they can say whatever they want on groups and forums and have their opinion expressed publicly, and it makes them look strong. But the thing is that the government watches these forums, they watch these groups, and they see the way people talk about these laws, and they talk about them. They screenshot it, they'll take and bring it right back up and support their argument that, hey, these people are totally against this. So I think it's a global effort for everyone to try to be a little bit more intelligent about the topic and make a real argument about, the racing industry. I think it's a huge thing. I'm doing everything I can to try to drive that nail home, and I've taken a lot of abuse online for it, for sure. But, I'm gonna keep doing my part in trying to defend the racing industry. It affects everybody. The diesel industry is getting hit hard now, but I think it's a global thing. Diesel is just a low-lying fruit at the moment.
I mean, they've already gone after some of the bigger gas tuners and stuff, so they've definitely made it known that that they're not just diesel guys. Because I know a bunch of other guys when I started making the same thing when we had our shop and making sure that we are compliant with all that, guys like, oh, they're not going to go after gas guys. You saw these guys rolling coal, and then they went after James Evans and a bunch of other guys, and it just they're very clear that anyone they can go after within their very broad interpretation of the law, they're out there to make a point.
Yeah, Brian, you're dead on, and I think it's important that people understand that and understand the realization of it. A lot of people have dealt with this, and it's been swept under the table, and they don't talk about it because they're afraid if they talk about it out loud, it's going to damage their reputation or scare customers away from their business. And maybe I'm one of the only retards that actually are out there and talking about the things that we go through, but it's a real matter, and anyone that's making an aftermarket product that doesn't have an EO number because they're legitimately making it for race vehicles, we all have a problem right now. So I think it's very important that we do our part in trying to get the RPM Act passed, so at least we have a basic definition. It's a step in the right direction, as Bill was saying.
Yeah, for sure. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head too, talking about people, stop going on your Facebook groups and talking like an idiot. No, we want to straight pipe our street cars and blah, blah, just say whatever you want. And that stuff's going to hurt us in the end. Like, is having your street car, Honda Civic, 2012 Camaro, whatever it is, straight piped without a cat and that minor improvement or whatever, really worth losing, like you said, every single manufacturer that makes the race parts, losing racing? I crew in multiple series that rely on, we have to start with a factory vehicle. They are race cars. Our insurance means we can't carry, the vehicle can't be registered. We have to prove it's not registered. And a lot of times we are starting with cars that don't have VINs on them anymore, that were pre-production chassis and stuff like that. But if that starts going away, then 99% of the cars in all the series I work with go away, and that's money out of my pocket, money out of manufacturers' pockets. That's at a certain level, money out of OEM pockets. A lot of OEMs use racing to prove their vehicles.
Yeah. And, I think Scott Clark had a really good outlook on it all. Scott, what's kind of your opinion on the matter?
I don't know if my opinion was
I mean, it could be varied from what ours, and that's what makes this content really good. That's why I'm hoping we could come in with another view of it and then, relate everybody in the same aspect. I think everyone speaks the same arguments in some sense.
Can I speak in a broad or a general sense on the whole, or like the RPM Act thing? The one thing that was important to me, I saw on some of these Facebook and social media posts, I guess I saw a lot of hyperbole or a lot of not real clarity, but tonight I'm hearing real clarity, which and it correlates with everything that I was able to research. So, I'm finding out that, like Brian just gave a pretty good spiel on how people on the internet, don't say stuff or don't do this, whatever. But then I'm realizing I kind of misinterpreted what you were saying. You're trying to put a positive spin on things, and I'm like, hey man, here's what's good, here's what's bad. So one of my observations is the laws about modifying or tampering with regulated emissions equipment have been pretty clear and written for like almost 40 years. Most of them. The Code of Federal Regulations, the CFRs, define what the engines or the vehicles in the fleet have to comply with and for how long. And those, a lot of these things, a lot of these companies know they were breaking those rules, and they just, we were all getting away with them not being enforced, right? So there's that issue. which a lot of guys are having trouble with right now. And then there's the issue of this unclear verbiage that RPM Act is asking the EPA or the government to require the EPA to state clearly, hey, look, this isn't a gray area. We really want this to be a black and white area. And I'm with you. So I actually did sign up my thing for the RPM Act, but I am going to write my the people who represent me here where I live. But anyway, so yeah,
I
actually in the end we agreed, but my concern was the hyperbole. I wanted to see it spelled out for everybody. You know, real simple. There's two issues here. There's the rules that we're in trouble for that have been in law and in place forever, and they're just now deciding to enforce. And then there's this new stuff where is probably the bigger worry, because it gives them momentum, you know, and I guess like Bill had kind of explained to us, you really want to fight it even if it doesn't affect you directly or you don't think it does. You know, because it does affect motorsports as a whole. Now, I think of pro mod or pro stock teams. I mean, I work with people who have no idea what this is about and don't care. You don't care at all, you know, and I don't think those guys are under threat, but you're right. If there's a diesel engine that's ever derived from a Duramax that's going to race in a pro mod class, then right now, the way that the laws are headed or the way that the precedents are headed is such that, you know, you're screwed. You took that out of an emissions controlled vehicle or parts off of it, and therefore the laws apply to you right there on the racetrack. I mean, I don't know where that's going, but I'm with you. I mean, I understand.
The laws are written so broadly that, like, I mean, not that a bolt, but like if you decided a bolt was an emissions compliant device, that bolt can go in any engine. Now that's not EO compliant. So like it's that broad, like a whatever part. So if it can go on,
super gray area. I don't like that. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, sorry about the rambling thoughts.
The gray areas. No, you're good. I like it, man, and that's the thing. And I'm glad you're able to see a bunch of it. And a lot of times, text written down on social media doesn't interpret the meaning that we're trying to get across the board. And I'm more guilty of that than anything.
No, same here. I'm feeling guilty of not realizing that. You know what people write online is not really who the person they are necessarily. Get to know them a little better, get a chat going with them, and then all of a sudden you understand. So. That's my thing.
Yeah,
carry on.
You know, and one of my biggest things, you know, we were talking about sacrifice earlier. You know, I definitely my intentions are never to try to look like the golden child of the industry by any means. But you know, I know a lot of my friends that make these high performance engines, high performance parts. I mean, for everything, you know, they can't afford to go and fight these type of battles. And we've been fortunate enough that I was like, well, golly, if you know, these guys can't do it, who's going to fight for them? So for me, it was like, I can do it. I'll go and try to get a good, definite interpretation of how everything works. Like I'm a fixer, you know, for me, and nothing ever matters about making money off of it. I just like to fix things or, you know, the challenge. So I was like, not a problem. I'm gonna go to Washington. We're going to chat about it. They're going to realize what the problem is. And then boom, it doesn't work that way by any means. It's very, very, very difficult process, but you know, I really, really, really tried to be an advocate for racing and stuff that I was saying kind of, you know, even a year ago online about, you know, there's no legality for modifying a street car to make it a race vehicle. You know, I was called crazy, you know, a little bit, but then, you know, SEMA come out just over the past few weeks with their whole thing. They're like, hey, you cannot convert your street car currently. And, you know, it is kind of cool to see that being recognized, that there is a legitimate problem there, because most of this stuff for the past few years has been kind of swept under the rug. And it's nice to see this stuff kind of come into light. You know, the argument isn't that you want to take a deleted truck and put it on the road to make it last forever. The argument is that I have a 1,500 horsepower 2006 Duramax sitting in the shop that I can't legally bring to the track. You know, that's my argument.
Well, technically, you can't even legally have it sitting in the shop the way the law is written.
Yeah, well, it could come in the shop, but it can't leave the shop.
Yeah, and that's
gray area. It's supposed to be. Yeah, it's another gray area.
We don't know. We don't know. And it's like, you know, people don't want to get busted. They don't want to have this happen. And yet, again, since there were two cars on the road at the same time, people have been racing cars, and if I can find a way to make mine faster than the guy in the lane next to me, I'm going to want to do that. So, you know, we have a kind of a human nature thing. I know it's funny, people are talking about electric cars and this and that, but first thing that people start doing is they want to figure out, how do I make my electric car go faster. I mean, that's going to happen too,
Yeah.
like it or not. It's like, well, what can I do with this? Well, is it emissions controlled? No. So I could put better batteries in my Tesla and it's non-emissions. So yay. We don't know where this is going to go. I just think it's cool that, people like Kory and PPEI are PPEI, sorry, are helping people go faster and do it in a way that at least keeps them on the right side of things and are fighting the good fight to make it go that way. And God love you, man, for making a diesel pro mod.
Right.
Saying those words out loud.
Were any of you guys possibly at PRI? We brought it to PRI.
Oh yeah,
I walked by it. I hadn't met you then. Unfortunately,
dang, I wish I'd have been around, man.
Yeah, it was like walking by it. It's like, God dang, look at that. I mean, there were always
I'm kind of
in that booth.
I'm kind of curious how you make, how the chassis tuning is different dealing with the RPM and torque of a diesel versus the RPM and torque of a more conventional style racing engine, because it's got to hit the chassis different. It's got to be weird.
It's very weird. We ran the first few. Like I said, I think we've got 15 hits on this car total from the time the motor's dropped in it and we get it fired up to now. And so we go out with this thing and hitting it with lockups like a whole nother ball game. The torque coming in is just ridiculous. And we're running the car right now. The fuel and trap speed we have in it, it was making around 2,000 horsepower. This motor's capable of about 3,000 once we get it all to the ground. And we were running no lockup. So after the event was over with, I was like, man, let's just try to hit it with lockup and we'll see what happens. And it just like skated towards the wall and I almost cried. I was like, no, get it out. We're going to
lockups are violent,
on the
man.
hub dyno and get a lockup. Yeah, let's get this lockup strategy dialed in on the hub dyno, and then we'll come revisit the track. I can't afford to wreck this car right now. Yeah, it was very different, very different. So with the Motec though, and the calibrators we have on board and our suspension guy, it's been a huge learning experience for me. I don't have a whole lot of experience in drag racing at this level. So, having the experienced calibrators and suspension guys that we have, luckily enough on our team, I'm just basically a student. I'm sitting back there learning. It's a different world for me, for sure. I'm used to reverse engineering ECUs, and this is, you can write your own basically source code into the ECU. What? It's really cool. The way we can run the suspension and nitrous and everything in collaboration with each other is just beautiful. So it's a learning experience for me.
So what else? Anybody else got questions? Any comments on the inability to get into any ag or ECU controlled tractor power mods based on current law and the lack of lobbying in that arena? So any thoughts? Do you work on any agricultural, or have you ever had any agricultural experience?
Yeah, we have some agricultural experience, but you know what? A lot of people think that off-road vehicles are exempt. They are not.
Nope. Right.
So the ag follows basically the same laws that it's different laws. Off-road and recreational vehicles, which is two totally different things, but they still have their own set of laws that are taken. Even like UTVs and side-by-sides. We're big into UTV racing. That's my number one hobby, is off-road racing. But they also have their same set of laws, that they have to follow. So I haven't become I know I can't take and bring a huge combine to SEMA and have it approved. So we're working right now to try to find out what legal methods that we can go through to actually provide calibrations to these. We're purchasing a dyno that runs through the PTO, so that way we can actually dyno and, if anything, we'll be able to test our emissions on those vehicles and find out what we can do. But currently, I would be willing to say there's no one in the world that's ever done emissions testing on an agricultural vehicle. So now that we're in the water of all of it, I'm having to learn all that too. So hopefully whatever we learn, I can take and I can supply the public with that information. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to basically find a way to do these things to where it satisfies the government, and then provide the data to the rest of the world, so that way they don't have to go through the bull crap we've gone through and the expensive fines. So the answer to that is, we have experience in it, but I don't know how to sell it yet because there's no guidelines as to what I need to do to sell this product. It's a very frustrating situation, to say the least.
Right. Yeah, we get it. That sucks.
Yeah,
questions?
It's extremely frustrating.
Anybody else?
I think the one.
Mark, are you watching Facebook?
Oh. Yeah, we did. We have one question that I missed on Facebook.
Okay.
And it was a tuning question.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to scroll through and find it here. Michael Dickinson asked, my 2007 5.9 smokes like a freight train and has stupid high EGTs you have to manage with the pedal. Not great mileage as well. Tuned with EFI Live. What should I do?
Well, I think step one is, well, what I would suggest is step one, put the vehicle to stock. Put the stock calibration in it. Does it have high AGTs? Does it still smoke? If your answer is it doesn't smoke anymore and it doesn't have high AGTs, get a different tuner, because your tuner should be telling you from the data I analyze of what's going on with the vehicle. So I would suggest putting it stock, see if the issue still happens. If it doesn't happen anymore, ask your tuner about it or find a new tuner. Someone that can diagnose the vehicle properly remotely so they can tell you what's wrong with it, because it shouldn't be doing that. I've seen them make 500 rear-wheel horsepower with a 17 to 1 AFR and not hardly have any smoke. So there's no reason it should be smoking like a freight train at that horsepower level.
Anybody else?
Guys, this is a good chance to ask. That was a great straight up kind of technical question on the diesel tuning. Anybody else got questions like that? Let's post them up now. Don't get all these kind of chances with somebody like Kory to have on here. So let's get
my question is, do you focus more on Duramaxes, or would you say 5.0 or the Cummins straight sixes is equally, or what about the Fords? What all do you specialize in, or do you do them all, or what?
Yeah, we do them all. And you know what? The ECU architecture across Ford and Duramax have been very, very, very similar from years 2011 all the way up to roughly 2016. And even for Ford, it's still the same basically through 2019. So, and at the end of the day, we're working with a combustion engine. So for me, it's really no different. Rather, I'm on a Duramax or a Cummins or a Volkswagen or, whatever. It doesn't matter. To me, it's air to fuel. We've got, if you use good turbocharging, we got compressor maps. So we know what the efficiency of these things are. So regardless of what diesel platform it is, I make sure that, for one, I'm hitting the set points that I set. And then after you hit your set points, then it's all just straight up air and fuel and dyno time. So for us, it really doesn't make a difference to me what vehicles brought to us. We're gonna make it as efficient as possible and make some power.
So what's the current limitation? Is it I was going to say injectors, fuel pumps. What's the typical limitation on the stock equipment? As far as, once you're out of being able to tune it up, turn it up into the ECU, what are the first things you run into? I mean, I see aren't there people out there with upgraded pumps, and these are mechanical pumps, if I understand it correctly. And then I'm guessing injectors with bigger capacity. Do you run into problems with oversized injectors that can't flow little enough fuel for light loads and low RPMs, or what kind of stuff do you run into hard parts wise?
That's a good question. If you would have asked me roughly 8 months ago, I'd have probably given you a different answer. But let's use the 6.7 liter Ford, for example, 27-year model, or 2019. We got one at the shop. We were making roughly 550, 560 horsepower before we were basically considering it out of turbocharger and also out of fuel pump. Well, whenever all this, our whole regulation thing came in, we had to really revisit the tuning. I I came back in and I really started studying how this fuel system works and how the return valve works, and basically going more than just giving it fuel, giving it air, then to see what the output is. And, we're up to 630 rear wheel horsepower on the 2019 Ford bone stock now. We introduced water methanol into it. We're able to get the intake air temperatures way down because we had the turbocharger pretty heated. The intake air temp's pretty heated up. Put an intercooler on it, and we're up to 675 horsepower now at the tires with a stock turbo, stock fuel system, and everything. So I think the cool thing with this emission stuff is, for one, it forced us to go back and really relearn how these fuel systems interact. So, I'd have told you that our turbocharger was pretty much done at 550 horsepower. I was having to crank the boost to it. We're seeing some intake air temps, shaft speed starting to get up there. But what it was that we weren't getting quite the efficient combustion that we could have had before. So now we've got our injector duration further down than what it was before, and a lot higher high pressure than what we had previously, and the low pressure pump feeding forward a little more than what we used to. And with those changes, well, now that we've got more efficiency actually coming through the engine, we're able to actually get more out of this turbocharger with less boost pressure. So now on the Ford, I'm actually seeing the real limitation of the turbocharger versus what it would have been, what I would have told you it probably was 8 months ago. I've become really good friends with Mr. Gale Banks, and I've got to sit in quite a bit of time at his shop with him and really get educated on how the manifold air density and boost air density and all these good things work together to contribute to the final horsepower number. And since really being with him and understanding this data a little better, it's helped us come back in and revisit all of our programming. And some of it I'm looking at now and I'm like, I should have done that a little bit differently. But it was the industry standard. So to answer the question, on the Fords, I'm seeing that turbocharger is the first thing to kind of get tired. On the solenoid injector Cummins, it's a really, really fine mix between the injectors and turbocharger at the same time. And on the Duramax, prior to the 2017 model, it's hands down been the injection pump. So, but I'm going to revisit that injection pump and put the same logic to it that I've put to the Ford and see if maybe we can get the same outcome with that. So we'll see what happens. But ultimately, I'd say the most common denominator is going to be injector and turbocharger.
Got it.
So putting more air into it, leaning it out a bit. Most all of these diesels, 2001 up, you can see 600 plus out of them pretty clean.
Wow. Man,
we're just
impressive.
upgrading the turbocharging.
And those are big torque numbers on top of that because that's done at low RPM.
Yeah, huge torque numbers. And we were making bigger torque numbers before. Now I'm somewhere around the 1,200 foot-pound mark. But before we were doing all the emissions testing stuff, I was able to get the fuel in quite a bit earlier and really make a higher torque number in the 1,300s and in some applications the 1,400s. But we're pretty much standard around 1,200 now. But at the track, you're going to see pretty well the same times, with emissions, without emissions, it's going to be about the same times. So we're making pretty well the same exact horsepower on stock turbo or mildly upgraded applications.
Right. What else we got? I'm looking at the chat here. Who do you recommend for a 6.7 Cummins tuner? I have a 2012 Dodge 2500 with minor bolt-ons. I only use it for towing mostly. First off, is it a bad idea to go turning everything up with a tow rig? I mean, isn't that like the transmission killer, or does your trans guy slip you $50 under the table every time you sell somebody a programmer?
Yeah, right. So here's one thing that we do at our shop. So I used to have the DynoJet, what is it, the 225 or 22L, whatever it is. And I could only load that thing down with, say, 440 horsepower and 900 foot-pounds of torque. I would have it loaded down, and after a minute, my roller would start basically overheating. So we recently upgraded to a Dim Sport dyno that's actually got 4 eddies. It's a monster, and I can load 2,000 horsepower down for 5 minutes if I wanted to. 400,000 foot, 4,000 foot pounds of torque. It's a monster. Right. So what we do is I basically do a static test. So let's say I'll test it at 55 miles per hour, and I'll put this thing under as much load as I can to where it starts I'll bring the RPMs back down, make this thing start going backwards, load this sucker, and I'll monitor everything. And I've got tons of data that I'm monitoring. And then I come up to say 75 miles per hour and do the same thing, load it down. And I'll run these tests for over 5 minutes at a time. So after roughly 1 minute, you've got where everything starts to settle down, or you've got overheating starting to come into play. So I would like to think there's really no one else in the diesel industry that's really doing this much testing on their calibrations. And I would like to think that we've got some of the safest tow tunes out on the market. I leave all of the factory D-rates and all that stuff in place, and I make more horsepower than the factory. So without sacrificing all the D-rates and protection features, we're getting more horsepower, and I think that's a pretty good kick. So I would like to think that we're one of the best candidates to be able to supply tuning for that platform.
Right on.
So he's going to stay safe.
Good answer, and that's the right answer.
That's a great answer. Yeah.
So maybe that's our resume for how we do it, because whenever I hook up my trailer to these big freaking heavy trucks, big heavy trailer, I don't want my truck to break. Mechanical failures can happen at any point in time. They break all the time stock, but we do our due diligence to make sure that if we call it a towing tune, that it's safe.
Cool. Very cool. Let's see. Well, that question there. No, that's okay. Here's one that I think I can almost answer. But have you learned anything from newer Edge diesels, like let's say 2015 and up, that have transitioned to tuning changes you have rolled over to 7.3s or early 5.9s? I think he's asking, have you learned stuff on the later engines that translates back to the older engines?
Yeah, I think it's not just the later engines that are actually the contributing factor to rolling it over to earlier engines, but more so just learning in general. The experience we have. I think talking to Mr. Gale is a pretty cool example. He had talked about a lot of the intercooling testing he did recently and what he would have done differently, back in the 1950s, if he would have known what he knew today. Well, it's not so much that the newer parts changed what he would have done back then. It's just the constant gain of knowledge that you have over experience and time. So I wouldn't say that the newer vehicles have so much taught me a lot more about the older vehicles. It's just the time put in with vehicles overall that's taught me. And I think that applies to pretty much anyone in their field, Just the experience will teach you things that work on things you wish you would have done differently earlier, and then you can apply them.
Are you guys still going to stay in the market you're in? So for example, Ford announced that they're going to have this new 7-liter plus gas motor that they're going to be putting in a lot more heavy duty truck chassis. GM has not gotten away from some of the gas motors, and with the stress in the diesel market, do you guys see hitting some of those other markets? You're going to stay focused on where you are now?
No, definitely. It's a good question. I actually hired a really, really, really good gas calibrator. He's an engineer, and he's got a lot of schooling underneath him. We've sent him to multiple calibrating seminars, and he's very talented. And we've got another calibrator at the office that's done a lot of power sport calibrating, and then the really, really smart people at the office. And one of our latest things we've really been focusing on has been the power sports division, and then also EcoBoost. So we're just about to release all of our EcoBoost calibrations. But on top of that, we've got all the GM stuff pretty well done. I like anything forced induction for sure. They're fun to make power with. And then also Toyota. So we got the Toyota calibrations just about done. So yeah, that new motor Ford release, it seems like it's got a lot of potential on it. So yeah, I'd really love to be able to play with it. I've got we're looking to get in the exotic market. I've got a McLaren 570 that we play with a little bit here and there, and they've got a lot of potential. So yeah, I would like to over the next couple of years expand into anything that's got if it makes combustion, I'm in.
Cool. There's a question here from Brian C. Going back to the emissions laws. If the RPM Act passes, do you think that it could be expanded to cover street vehicles that have had emissions controls removed? The phrase emission controls removed, no. That'd be my short answer. On the other hand, if one of the things that the CARB folks talked about at SEMA this year at the seminar they did was upping the number of EOs processed, because they were in double digits for a couple of years, meaning you just could not get an exemption order processed through CARB. And now they're at least into 3 digits. Like, that sounds impressive. But they've, with working with the SEMA garage and other garages around the country, it looks like, and again, here's a reason to go vote, when times come, think about who you're going to vote for, because if you want our hobby to survive, I can only think of one guy to vote for. But anyway, not to be political. But the bottom line is, if we're going to maintain some stuff, because during the automotive bankruptcies, the laws that were pushed on the emissions side were so draconian, nobody can meet them. Nobody's ever gonna. And they were just designed to put fossil fuel cars out of business. So, vote what you like, vote your hobbies, vote your stuff. But the bottom line is, if they can open up the window a little bit to more exemption orders, to the ability to actually make those improvements and make cars run better, faster, and still, be legal as Kory and his team are doing, then yeah, that can happen that way. My opinion.
Yeah, I agree. If the RPM Act passes, then all of us manufacturers will have at least an understanding of the interpretation of the law. And there'll be no gray area, so to speak, hopefully. So I think it's a really big deal.
We've got another question for Kory off Mixler real quick before we go. Pat Lash is wondering if you've seen 2012 Duramax pump failure issues. He's had 3 fail at work, and they said we had to replace the entire fuel system. He read it was U.S. diesel having less lubrication than European diesel.
It's a good question. CP4 failures. I think there's actually, it's always popping up on my Facebook about the class action lawsuits against GM for CP4s. But I think, the guys at S&S Diesel and Linear Dynamite probably have a little in industrial injection, have better answers than I do. But in short, my understanding is that the CP4 pump that comes in this vehicle, the 2011 through, I think it's CP4.2 is what it's called. From 2011 through 2016, they went to Denso in 2017. That pump cannot take really any type of lack of lubricant. So if you've got any air, any contamination, this pump goes to absolute nothing. I mean, it goes to junk. I think a very good preventative maintenance for that is installing a low pressure fuel system, kind of like a FASS or an Air Dog, that would be able to take and provide adequate and good quality fuel through the pump all the time. It's got air separation. So I think that's a pretty big thing. All of the other manufacturers, if I'm not mistaken, that are supplying these CP4 pumps have a low pressure pump supplied to them. And I think that's why you don't see as many failures with the other manufacturers running basically the same fuel pump. So Duramax somehow got away with not putting in a low pressure fuel pump. So I think that's a big part of the failure. So most people do CP3 conversions. There's 50 state legal CP3 conversions as well out there that you could put on it. That would they're much more robust to taking damage than a CP4. But if you want to leave the CP4 in place, then I would recommend putting a low pressure fuel system on it and just staying on top of your filters. It's a very big deal for that platform.
That sounds like a reasonable suggestion. What else?
Yep.
Okay, looks like we're wrapping it up. Anybody else? You guys got some other thoughts before we let Kory go? Man, you did 90 plus minutes. Well, I guess after my 10 minutes of screwing around, we'll call it an hour and a half. We appreciate it. Man, thanks for coming on tonight. I know you're a busy guy too. You're just, I can tell by your messages that you got a lot going on at all times, and that's cool. We appreciate you hanging out for sure.
Man, I'm glad to be a part of it. Maybe I can get back on here a little next time. And we'll talk about
next time you have an update, man, or something you want to talk about. Next time you got an update, or something you want to talk about, you're welcome to come back.
Yep.
Heck yeah, awesome! I'd love to do it. That's a good time,
especially when you go pro mod racing. We want to hear how that works out, how the car ends up going. That car looks like it's got the potential.
We'll go try to give them boys a little run for their money. Maybe
you're redefining the thought on diesel because, well, I mean, diesel itself has come a long ways in the last 20 years. When I was younger, I mean, it'd be, rev that baby all the way up to 800 RPM and let her eat. I mean, there's it's come quite a ways, but to be in a pro mod is a whole different level.
It really is. We've got, Wade Moody joined our team with PPEI Racing, and Wade was NGM Diesels, and in my opinion, he holds about every record in the diesel platform for the most part, especially for Duramax. And getting him on board was just such a huge deal for us, and his knowledge, and then also his gas approach to this project's just been unbelievable. And so we're building a race shop right now, connecting it basically to PPEI, and we're going to be able to do mostly everything pretty well in-house. And having him there and having an engine dyno, I really think that we're going to be able to see diesels, especially diesel racing, progress like it hasn't before. So I think it's going to be a really, really, really cool thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Long ways to go, but we're making strides.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think you're in the area where you're gonna see big gains pretty rapidly. You talk about, well, we're behind the gas guys. It's not gonna be long. You'll catch up. So we'll be watching. That's cool.
We're gonna try. Now we were lacking the time and some of the technology to be able to get to that point. But I think by the time race season comes around, we'll have had the technology and testing to see exactly where we're at from a horsepower perspective. And then from then on out, we might have to re-engineer, something a little bit bigger. But we're going to see what kind of fight we can put up with it.
That's so cool.
Right on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a different platform for diesel. I mean, we're leaving the line at 5,500 RPMs and cranking her up to 7 roughly on the big end, so average 65. Wow. So it's pretty cool. We actually added, whenever we debuted when we debuted the car, we actually had added a little bit of bottom end fuel so people would know that it was a diesel, because we were afraid if we didn't have any smoke whatsoever on spool up or anything that, because it doesn't sound like a diesel. It sounds pretty much like a big block. So people, we added just a little bit just so that the videos that would travel the internet, people would know it was actually a diesel. But next time when we come around, this thing won't, no smoke, just flame, just beautiful nitrous flames coming out.
Just flames. I like that. No smoke, just flames. That's awesome.
That's it.
That's good. Taylor DeLosa made a comment. I think it's worth mentioning here. He says, "Thank you for the show tonight. It was informative and a great reminder. I needed to get a hold of my state representative." I don't think we can thank you enough, Kory, for doing the work that you're doing, by getting up in front of people and doing that and showing the way for some of these other folks. So thank you very much. We want to hear more about diesels and pro mod and the success you're having with the other classes and the other types of racing, pulling, sleds, all of that. Thank you for being on tonight. We're going to wrap it up here, guys.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Scott, you're going to take us out, and we will see you all next week on the RealTuners Radio Podcast.
I like it.
Woo. Thanks, Kory. Talk to you guys next week.
Hey, appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
And the music is playing, and we are out.